Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of Perth and Kinross Council. I will do as I'm about to advise everyone else, which is to please make sure your devices are on mute. I would welcome everyone who is watching the meeting in person or online. There will be a lunch hour at 1 o'clock if necessary, and there will be comfort breaks during the meeting as and when required. I will ask Scott Hendry to take a roll call of those who are attending virtually.
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, members. I don't think we have any formal apologies for today's meeting. So I'll now just do a roll call of those both in the chamber and who are joining online. So we have Bailey Ahern in the chamber. Councillor Allen is here. Councillor Anderson is here. Bailey is here. Councillor Liz Barrett is here and Councillor Peter Barrett. We have Councillor Braun. I believe Bailey Brock is joining us online.
Present.
Thank you. We have Councillor Carr here. We have Councillor Chan. We have Councillor Cuthbert and Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Drysdale. We have Councillor Duff. Councillor Forbes.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Frampton.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Freshwater. We have Councillor Harvey. We have Councillor Illingworth.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Morning, Scott. Present.
Thank you. We have Councillor Kugali here. Councillor Lang. Councillor Leishman. Councillor McPherson. Councillor Massey. Councillor McCole we have. Provost. Councillor McEwen. Bailey McLaren. Deputy Provost Parrott. Councillor Rebeck. Councillor Reid, I believe you're online.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson is here. Councillor Shires, are you online?
Present.
Thank you. We have Councillor Smith here, Councillor Colin Stewart, Councillor Grant Stewart is here, Councillor Waters is here, Councillor Welsh is here, and Bailey Williamson is here. So that's all members present, Provost.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hendry. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest in respect of today's business? I'm not seeing any declarations of interest. Therefore, item 2A1 is an urgent business item which I am accepting. It is a motion on the Boundary Commission for Scotland's proposals. This is to be moved by the Deputy Provost and seconded by Councillor Duff, and I'm accepting it on the grounds of its urgency based on the deadline being before the next scheduled meeting of the Council. Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Archprovost, and good morning. As people are aware, the Boundary Commission made known their updated proposals at midnight on Monday. And for the reasons the Provost has just explained, it was felt that if we're going to make a comment, it's best to make it in a scheduled council meeting rather than in one that we have to perhaps specially arrange. There's no doubt that the Boundary Commission's latest proposals in respect of Perth and Kinross are an improvement on what came earlier. I'm no great fan of the first past the post system, but we have to work with what we have, and the Boundary Commission have considerably improved their first proposals in that now most of Perth and Kinross is encompassed within 2 proposed Westminster constituencies, and those proposals for those 2 constituencies are, to my mind, within the principles set out by the Boundary Commission. However, I feel we owe it to our communities to seek to make the very best we can out of what the Boundary Commission are proposing. And so the first aspect, that there are 2 areas that still are in other constituencies. I don't think we can escape being part of a third constituency, but I think we can escape being 4. We've come down from 5 in the original proposals to 4 now. My motion, which I hope can have unanimous acceptance, seeks to accept the 2 main constituencies that are proposed, but it seeks to ask the Boundary Commission to look again at the placing of Scotland Well in the Glenrothes constituency. Kinross has never before been historically divided in parliamentary terms, and there is absolutely no reason why it should be again. And this relatively small number of voters in that Scotland Well polling district could be moved into the proposed Perth and Lochleven constituency, causing only a slight shuffling elsewhere in Fife to make sure that Glenrothes is of the requisite minimum size. Of slightly more concern are the Boundary Commission's proposals to include parts of Strathallan ward within the Clackmannanshire and Forth Valley constituency that has been proposed. I don't know how many people have looked in detail at the proposals, but this Clackmannanshire and Forth Valley constituency is about the oddest constituency I think I have ever seen proposed in my life, and I've been a long time person who's interested in these things. It essentially is in 3 completely disaggregated parts. The parts of Strathallan ward north of the Ochils with no road connection to the rest of the constituency, most of Clackmannanshire separated by the river from Denny, Stenhousemuir and Larbert. At the end of the day, the fate of the rest of the constituency is not our issue, but my proposal in this motion today is that the parts of Strathallan which cannot join the Perth and Lochleven constituency because of the size constraints should instead be allocated or put as part of the Stirling constituency, and that can be done without the Stirling constituency going over the maximum number that is allowed, and without Clackmannanshire and Forth Valley going below the maximum number allowed. And of course, parts of Stirling are parts of historic Perthshire, and my submission is that those areas of Strathallan that must go into a third constituency have far more in common and connection with those northern parts of the Stirling constituency than they ever do with Denny, Larbert, Stenhousemuir and Clackmannan over the hill. And the final points I'm making, I think that North Tayside is a name essentially from the past, and that the name North Perthshire and Angus, or even Angus and North Perthshire, far better represents the nature of that constituency. And for the second constituency that's entirely within Perth and Kinross, Perth, South Perthshire and Kinross much better represents that area than Perth and Lochleven. The constituency is more than just the city of Perth. And I am always a believer that names of constituencies should represent the peoples and communities. Lochleven is a body of water, and to my knowledge, no one actually lives in it. It's a nonsense name. Frogs, perhaps, and other things. And then, if you like, pushing the boundaries a little bit, I've also suggested, and I hope people accept, that if parts of Strathallan need to go into a Stirling constituency, then to my mind there is no harm in asking for the Stirling constituency to be named Stirling and Strathallan. Perhaps it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think we should do it, because part of our community will be in a third constituency, and they are no less important than any of the rest of us who will be in other constituencies. So I hope that this motion can gain unanimous support across the chamber. I'd like to thank those who have contributed to its setting up. I started at 6:30 on Tuesday morning. Once I had access to the figures, I wasn't going to start at midnight. And I'd like to thank in particular Councillor Stewart, who found for me or had found the detailed figures that the Boundary Commission were using for the parts of the constituencies that enabled me to come up absolutely accurately with the impact of moving bits around. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and I'm introducing Councillor Duff to second.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to start by thanking Councillor Parrott for bringing this emergency motion this morning and to yourself for allowing it to be added to today's agenda. I think all of us had significant concerns regarding the original proposals from the Boundary Commission, not least because it divided Perth and Kinross into 5 Westminster constituencies, breaching many of its own guiding principles in the process. Back in December of last year, there was a unanimous cross-party support for our motion on the initial proposals, and I very much hope that we will jointly send a further message to the Boundaries Commission on the revised proposals today. While the reduction to 4 constituencies is an improvement, some of the proposals around the margins make very little sense and continue to breach their own design principles unnecessarily. The boundaries being proposed by the Commission are still detrimental to both the electorate and to Perth and Kinross Council, especially to residents in the Strathallan ward and in the Scotland Well area of Kinrossshire. The minor amendments proposed in the motion are sensible, achievable and appropriate, and the adjustment needed would cause very little problem for the Boundaries Commission. If agreed this morning, I very much hope that the Boundaries Commission will see these suggested changes as a further improvement to their plans and have no hesitation in adopting them into the final recommendation. Provost, I commend the motion to colleagues and happy to second the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. I've got Councillor Robertson first to comment.
Thank you, Provost, and I also fully support the motion, and I often think that when the Boundary Commission actually come up with their proposals, they do it almost tongue-in-cheek, and I think they think it's a way of increasing our blood pressure and highlighting their work. But they have a record of actually listening to the submissions of Perth and Kinross Council in previous changes they've tried to make to boundaries. And particularly, I'm astonished actually at the thought of trying to separate the area of Kinrossshire out of the new constituency. Everyone here who knows Kinrossshire, you know it's a very tiny and compact area, and that works very, very closely together. And a little area like Portmoak, it seems crazy to separate the 2 villages, the main villages of the area. So I fully support the motion, and I wouldn't make any changes to it. And I'm pleased it's come before us.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Collins Stewart.
Thank you, Provost. Just to say, thank you, Deputy Provost, for your comments, but thank you to you as well for the work in bringing this forward at short notice. It's appropriate that we discuss it today when we have an opportunity within that consultation period to bring forward this proposal, which I fully support. I might say that the proposals contained within the motion actually probably help the Boundary Commission, because they will achieve fewer constituencies which cross council boundary areas and create more constituencies which are wholly contained within one local authority. Just perhaps a reflection. I don't know off the top of my head whether, I can't recall whether the Boundary Commission for Scotland notifies its proposals to community councils, but I wonder if, assuming that the motion gets adopted today, it might be useful for officers to forward the detail of the council's resolution to the affected community councils. I think that would be Portmoak, Auchterarder, Blackford and possibly one other. If those community councils are in existence, and invite them to comment as well, and also whether officers might consider placing particularly the Portmoak Community Council issue around Scotland Well on the agenda for next week's Kinrossshire Area Committee, and allowing that committee to come to a resolution and comment as well, because that would be proper devolution within the democratic process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart, and we will both notify the affected community councils, and it will also be put on the agenda for Kinross Area Committee, subject to the convener and the vice convener agreeing that, which I'm getting a nod from the convener and the vice convener, so that will be done. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. I must be different to many of my colleagues here today because what makes my blood pressure rise is the antique first past the first post voting system. That's the real problem with our Westminster system. We cannot fix that by getting our crayons out and drawing the boundaries in different places on a map. This is all distraction to stop us looking at the real problems we face. It's a crying shame that we must address this today when we have such important business on as child poverty and climate change on our agenda. Therefore, I thank Deputy Provost, Councillor Duff, Councillor Stewart and all the others who've contributed diligently to this motion. However, these boundary changes are a classic case of rearranging the deck chairs as the metaphorical Titanic breaks in half and starts its steady descent towards the electoral abyss, taking our democracy with it. I have no amendment, but we must keep this thing in context. It's an attempt to fix the symptoms, not the root cause of our broken political system. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Bailey. Deputy Provost, to sum up.
Thank you very much, Provost. Yes, I have sympathy, Bailey, with your position on first past the post, but we have to live with the system that we have, and we have to, as I said, get the best out of it for our communities. And I think that my emergency motion today is seeking to do that with those parts of our communities that are not going to be included, perhaps in the two main constituencies that will be part of that we will be in Perth and Kinross and partly in Perth and Kinross. I can do no more than commend the motion to the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and my thanks to you for pulling together a very impressive urgent motion on what is a complex topic, and I think our previous motion, which you also helped lead on this matter, has ensured that we have improved the situation, and I hope that this one will further improve the situation. I think we are now quite close to getting a reasonable setup within the confines of the first past the post system, which obviously a number of us don't agree with, but we must indeed work within the system we have. So thank you very much to all those involved, and if Council is then agreed, we can agree the motion. Thank you very much. Item 2A2 is another urgent business item, which is a motion on fast track cities proposed by Councillor Peter Barrett and seconded by Councillor Colin Stewart. Again, I am accepting this on the grounds that the deadline for proposed signing is before the next scheduled meeting of the Council. Councillor Peter Barrett to move.
Thank you, Provost, and I want to thank you for enabling this motion to come forward on the agenda today, and I hope that members will support Perth and Kinross Council becoming a fast track city and playing its part within the global alliance of cities and their efforts which unite local leaders and organisations with the common goal of ending the HIV epidemic. They do that by building on and strengthening local HIV programmes to accelerate a locally coordinated response which reflects the specific local needs to meet the UN AIDS target of eliminating HIV by 2030, which is also one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Fast Track Cities has been successfully working towards that goal for the past 4 years in Scotland. Glasgow became Scotland's first fast track city in 2018, with Aberdeen following a year later. Post-pandemic, Dundee's fast track city ambitions have been expanded to include all of Tayside, and I'm very grateful to Jimmy Hunter of the Terence Higgins Trust, who was instrumental in inviting Perth and Kinross to be part of a wider programme in recognition of the strength of Perth and Kinross's equalities work and commitment to tackling AIDS-related stigma. Councillors, many of you will remember the dark, apocalyptic 1986 TV AIDS advert with its tombstone AIDS inscription and "Don't die of ignorance" message. Times have thankfully changed. Highly active antiretroviral therapy now gives people living with AIDS near normal life expectancy and is available as a single tablet. Treatment is now the means of prevention. If you're on the right medication, then your viral load can be reduced until it is undetectable and unviable. It is undetectable and untransmittable, and this is known as U equals U. PrEP, which is short for pre-exposure prophylaxis, is medication that can be taken by HIV-negative people at higher risk of infection, mainly men who have sex with men, and is almost 100% effective if taken as prescribed. Scotland was the first country to provide PrEP via sexual health clinics. First country in Europe to provide PrEP via sexual health clinics. And finally, PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis, is medication that can stop the virus taking hold if a person has been exposed. There has never been more people living with HIV in Tayside than there are now. We see new HIV diagnoses every year, but thanks to the modern treatment I've described, HIV-related deaths are rare. People with HIV continue to experience disproportionate stigma and discrimination, which impacts on willingness to test for HIV or engage with treatment and prevention interventions. Ultimately, stigma fuels the ongoing HIV epidemic in Tayside and further afield. The Fast Track Cities programme aims to tackle stigma and improve access to treatment and testing. Through the Paris Declaration, they have set out a route map to get to zero by 2030. And that means zero new HIV infections, zero deaths from AIDS-related illnesses, and zero discrimination. They have set a target of 95% of people living with HIV knowing their HIV status, 95% of people who know their status are receiving treatment, and 95% of people receiving treatment are virally suppressed. The Fast Track Cities initiative can offer us technical support, including data and systems, opportunities to share best practice via connections with other Fast Track cities, and capacity building support and solutions for funding and resource mobilisation. With the support of Fast Track Cities, we could be on track to meet the UNAIDS target of eliminating HIV by 2030. It's worth noting that Tayside was the first region in the world to eliminate hepatitis C, and with Fast Track Cities, we could do the same for HIV. In conclusion, Provost, I would like to thank Jackie Pepper for her assistance in getting the final paragraph of this motion right as to how this commitment is operationalised. And once again, thank you, Provost, for allowing this motion to come forward, which, if passed, will allow for you formally to sign the Paris Declaration on World AIDS Day on December the 1st. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peter Barrett. Councillor Colin Stewart next. Councillor Barrett, can you switch your microphone off, please? Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Provost. Provost, councillors, my thanks to Councillor Barrett for bringing forward this helpful and constructive proposal today. Too often when we consider health matters, we address current issues, and obviously the diagnosis and treatment of people currently living with HIV addresses a current issue. But in seeking to look forward and reduce future infection, we're thus subscribing to a public health agenda for future population health. The treatment plan for people living with HIV includes regular testing, allowing the detection, diagnosis and treatment of a range of bloodborne virus conditions. In Tayside, as Councillor Barrett already mentioned, hepatitis C virus has already been effectively eliminated in what, if I recall correctly, is a global first. This has been recognised globally, and Tayside's case has been quoted in the New York Times, for example. We're fortunate as a body here to have amongst our members, who I think may be speaking shortly, somebody who was part of the wider team that worked on that hepatitis C elimination programme. And so taking that model, we can do the same for HIV. It must be a joint and collective effort, and the text of the motion recognises that, where the Chief Officer is invited and Director of Integrated Health and Social Care is invited to collaborate with colleagues in Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership, NHS Tayside, the other councils and the Community Planning Partnership. Provost, councillors, I commend the motion to the Chamber today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Colin Stewart. Councillor Sheila McCall with a point of clarification.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you very much to Councillors Barrett and Stewart for bringing this motion forward. My point of clarification really is about the wording of the final paragraph and the reference to a Chief Officer of Dundee IJB. I don't think the IJB has a Chief Officer. I'm just wondering, should it be the Chief Officer of Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership rather than the IJB?
I think I can answer that. It is a Chief Officer to the IJB, and I'm getting clarification here. Don't think I need to go to the mover or a seconder to confirm that, but the IJB's appoint the Chief Officer. Yeah, and Jackie Pepper is online and is going to just provide further clarification.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, just in terms of clarifying that, I would agree with you, Provost. The appointment is the Chief Officer to the IJB, and each Chief Officer is also a Director of NHS Tayside and their parent body local authority. So it's one of those situations where we have a number of roles, but in this respect, it's the Chief Officer of the Dundee IJB, because it is the Dundee Integrated Joint Board that has the lead partner responsibility for sexual and reproductive services across Tayside. So that's the distinction there. Thanks, Councillor McCall.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and thank you, Councillor McCall, for your point of clarification. Councillor McCune, I will bring you in a second, but I'm going to come to Bailey first with a point of clarification as well. Not a question, but a point of clarification.
Thank you. It probably is more of a question. If I tell you what it is, you can rule whether it's competent at this stage or not. I would like to ask the mover and the seconder whether they have any data as to how close we are to these measures. Obviously, fully support it, but wondering if we have any data that tells us how close we are to the 95, 95, 95.
In the spirit of consensus, Councillor Peter Barrett is going to give you an answer.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Provost. It won't be a full answer, but I can forward Councillor Bailey the information following the meeting, because it was on a slide in a presentation that I received at the meeting on the 31st. From my recollection, we are at 97% of people living with HIV knowing their status, but we are well short of both the other 95% for people knowing their status, being on antiretroviral therapy, and people on antiretroviral therapy having suppressed viral loads. And I think cumulatively, at the moment in time, we would be below the percentage you would arrive at if you took 95% of 95% of 95%. So we still have a way to go. I think we are ahead of the previous targets, which were the 90-90-90 targets. But as I say, I can provide the information to Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. If you could circulate that to Bailey afterwards, that would be great. Councillor Tom McEwen with a comment.
Thank you, Provost. First, I'd like to thank both Councillor Barrett and Councillor Stewart for bringing this very important motion to the Council. I wholeheartedly agree with what they said, and I congratulate Councillor Barrett on some of his wise words regarding HIV, its stigma and its treatment. You know, my master's degree project was in the area of HIV treatment 20 years ago, and yes, the treatments have hugely advanced and changed since then. And this fast track cities model, I think, will be a very constructive way of taking this forward. As councillors have already mentioned, I was part of the bloodborne virus group in the NHS Tayside prior to being a councillor, where we very proactively and through a very unique model eradicated Hep C within NHS Tayside area, and yes, it was a world first. And congratulations for the enthusiasm for that goes to Professor Dillon, who still works at 9 Mills in this area. And I think should the same model be applied to HIV and the work that these groups would do, then the success would then follow. So I think it's a very, very apt thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen, for for that contribution. I don't have any other contributions indicated in the chat, and therefore I will come to Councillor Barrett to sum up.
Very briefly, Provost, thank members for their interest, and if passed, I very much look forward to working with Tom McEwen in his role as convener of housing and social wellbeing, and how we can take this forward in Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett, and thank you for bringing this important topic to the Council. Members, can we agree the motion? Thank you very much, members. Members, item 3 is the minute of the previous meeting. Can we agree the minute of the Council meeting of the 28th of September 2022? Thank you. Members, item 4.1 is a motion on the Royal National Mod Perth that took place in October. The motion is proposed by Councillor Duff and seconded by Councillor Lane. So, Councillor Duff, would you like to introduce the motion, please?
Thank you, Provost. As members will be aware, the Royal National Mod took place here in Perth last month after an absence of 18 years. And I didn't think we could let today's council meeting pass without recording formally our thanks and congratulations to everyone involved in helping to make it such a successful occasion. During the event and since, I've spoken to many Gaels and supporters of Gaelic who attended this year's Royal National Mod in Perth, and without fail everyone praised the event highly. The mod competitions, the mod fringe events, the venues, the volunteers, the warm and welcoming atmosphere, or the blas as we would say in Gaelic, the city and the people of Perth. The numbers of people who were involved in making this cultural event a reality are far too many to mention, and hopefully the motion includes everyone involved in whatever capacity. I would, however, like to make special mention of the local organising committee and the many volunteers without whom this venture could not have happened. They worked tirelessly in the lead up to the mod, during the event and afterwards, and greatly deserve our thanks and our gratitude for all their efforts. I also have to say that in Common Gaelach, we're extremely appreciative of the support given to them by this council, the senior management team and the many officers involved. In that regard, I think it would be remiss of me not to pick out the name of Donald MacLeod, who put in a tremendous amount of effort on our behalf. Tapalive Dol. Provost, apart from the kudos which the City of Perth has gained by hosting this year's mod, the economic benefit to our local economy will be significant, probably in the region of £1 million, and I'm certain that many of the businesses and the hospitality and accommodation providers in the area greatly appreciated the boost this event gave them. It is vital that we continue to attract events such as the Royal National Mod to Perth and Kinross, and we would be grateful, we should be grateful for the foresight of our predecessors in building up a fund over the last 18 years to support the return of the mod, our 11th since it first began. I would therefore like to conclude my comments by asking members to agree that prior to the end of our 5-year term, we submit a further bid to host another national mod, and let's not make it another 18 years before Mod Fiarst takes place again. Provost, I'm delighted to move acceptance of the motion. Morantang. Thank you.
Morantang, Councillor Duff. Councillor Lane, 2 second.
Thanks very much, Provost, and thanks, Councillor Duff, for bringing this motion. We've already written to the Mod Committee, etc., thanking them for coming to Perth and Kinross and putting forward such a spectacular event. I learned a lot in the week. Unfortunately, I didn't learn any Gaelic language, but I learned a lot about the customs, etc., that go along with the mod, and shinty, etc., being one of them. Councillor Duff, both competing and representing Perth and Kinross very well, as I hope I did, along with officers and many elected members who turned up to the events and shared Perth and its delights around the bars, etc., over the week. It was a hard week for me within the council, but thoroughly enjoyed it all. I'd like to especially single out Donald, or Donny as he got known as the week went on. He was fantastic, and he seemed to know everybody who was there, and coming from Lewis, and that was fantastic to hear all the different accents and the enjoyment that they had to be coming back to Perth, but also being one of the first mods that they could actually all meet in person. It was good to be part of the Torchlit Parade and to meet our elected members and officers from Renfrew to where the mod will be heading next year. And they praised and said they could learn some of the events and the way that we handled our officers, organised things and handled the events. So I'd like to thank the officers and everybody within Perth and Kinross and the businesses within Perth and Kinross and the people of Perth and Kinross, which made the whole event enjoyable, trouble-free, and ran so smoothly. I agree totally with Councillor Duff that we should be looking to put finance in, as we have over the last years, towards putting another bid in for the mod, rather than having to put a bid in as they do with the Eurovision Song Contest and have to pay for it all in one lump sum. So I think that his last point I fully support. So I'd just like to thank everybody who had anything to do with the mod, and I fully support this motion and second it.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor John Rebek, first comment.
Thank you, Provost. It turns out the council leader's not a bad shinty penalty taker, actually, as it goes. But Matting Va, good morning. The mod was great. The Gaelic language and all of its trimmings, as were on display in Perth, were fabulous, and they're part of Scots culture. They're enjoyed by many, including those of us that don't speak Gaelic. And what's not to like? Music, poetry, dance, the pipes, clarsach, shinty, football, and busy pubs, music and good cheer. So yes, notwithstanding the already agreed circuit, bring it on. Let's get it back to Perth and Kinross as soon as we can. Tapla.
Thank you, Councillor Rebek. Councillor Leishman next.
Thank you, Provost. Since the first mod in 1892, only the 2 world wars in the pandemic year of 2020 have seen it cancelled. And following a global health emergency, it is great to see people come together to socialise, to sing, to play sport and be in company again. This was the 11th time the mod has visited our region, with this being the 10th time Perth has hosted the gathering. The cultural importance of the event is significant. Gaelic is a vital part of Scotland's history, and it's imperative that it is part of our future. While attending events, it was great to hear from native speakers the efforts being made to grow the language. The benefits to Perth and Kinross of hosting the mod are manifest. Our communities become better places when interacting with different cultures, when we become more knowledgeable of the successes, the struggles and the rich heritage of people. That can only be good. We want to see our local shops, bars, restaurants and hotels flourish and stimulate our local economy, and we want visitors to enjoy the wonderful green spaces of our inches at either end of our city centre, to attend our concert hall and theatre and to leave our area vowing to come back. Perth is wealthy in its facilities and its hospitality, and we are delighted to hear that the council will do everything in its power to win the right to host a special event again in the near future. Perth and Kinross Labour would like to thank everyone from In Common Gaelic, the local organising committee, Perth Gaelic Society, all our hard-working council staff, Culture PK, Horsecross Arts and Live Active Leisure, as well as the many volunteers, partners, stewards and sponsors for coordinating such a well-attended, popular and smoothly run event across many venues. And also thanks to Provost McDade, the leader of the council, Councillor Lane, and our council's Gaelic Medium Education spokesperson, Councillor Duff, for their fine work during the mod as ambassadors of Perth and Kinross Council and our region as a whole. Perthshire's historic and continuing dedication to the promotion of Gaelic language and culture within the city and wider rural communities is something we can be proud of, and I'm looking forward to celebrating the Perthshire and Angus Provincial Mod in Aberfeldy in June 2023, which is their centenary year. All that leaves to be said is, and pardon the pronunciation, Gisankani Shin Arish Taplev.
Thank you, Councillor Leishman. Councillor Duff to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be brief. I thank my colleagues for the very supportive comments round about National Mod. I think it has been, as I said in the motion, a very successful occasion and well respected and thought of highly by the mod beguiled effectively. I think it was great to get back after 3 years absence because of COVID, but I think everything about the mod location here in Perth was exceptional, and it's certainly reflected in the comments that I and Uncommon Gaelic have received in the aftermath of it taking place here. So, as I said in the motion, let's hope it's not another 18 years before we're able to speak about Mod Fiarst again. Thank you.
Hear, hear, Councillor Duff. Hopefully we will be able to bring the bond back very soon. Thank you to all of you who contributed, and indeed those who made a special effort to speak Gaelic there. Thank you. Montang, even. I did learn that bit during the mod, so that's my learning for the week. And anyone who wishes to join the council Shinty team should speak to the leader of the council at the end of the meeting. Members, if we can agree the motion. Thank you. Item 4.2 is a motion on anti-Semitism. It is proposed by Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks very much, Provost. Could I just point out one correction to the text of the motion, and that is within the first bullet point that the council is being asked to note, and in the second line of that we make reference to the International Holocaust Memorial Alliance, which should in actual fact be remembrance and not memorial, so apologies for that slight error, but I just wanted to draw members' attention to that. Provost, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism was adopted by the UK government in 2016. At that time, the then Prime Minister Theresa May said, "It is unacceptable that there is anti-Semitism in this country. It is even worse that incidents are reportedly on the rise." Subsequently, in 2017, the definition was adopted by the Scottish Government as part of the plan of action to implement the recommendations made by the Independent Advisory Group on Hate Crime, Prejudice and Community Cohesion. Provost, anti-Semitism has no place in our society and no place in Perth and Kinross, and this motion is brought to Council at a time when Holocaust denial is rising in Scotland, when there's been an increase in prevent referrals in the north of Scotland recently, and the proportion of these involving extreme right-wing motivation is increasing. As a council, we have a strong record of promoting equalities and inclusion, of tackling hate speech, racism and bullying in our schools and communities. We have done and continue to do tremendous work with the Anne Frank Trust in our schools and anti-prejudice education. In Bertha Park School and Perth High School, 40 pupils were trained as peer educators to lead tours through the History for Today programme. That's a programme which centres on a pop-up exhibition about the life of Anne Frank and how her story can inspire young people to challenge prejudice. The exhibitions were visited by 870 other pupils and their parents. Anti-prejudice workshops focused on homophobia, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism followed the peer education training and the History for Today exhibitions. Then both schools requested anti-prejudice workshops, and these workshops helped pupils develop more open attitudes, critical thinking and empathy skills, as well as providing practical ways they can tackle stereotypes, discrimination and hate. In total, these workshops directly reach 120 young people. Provost, this is the sort of work that this motion seeks to support and is submitted to Council in that spirit, and is a further step towards making Perth a fairer, more inclusive place where everyone is respected and appreciated regardless of race or religion, and I commend it to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Peter Barrett. I'm going to introduce Councillor Harvey to second the motion, please.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Barrett, for proposing this motion. Anti-Semitism is a scourge that has afflicted the Jewish community for millennia, and is often the first step towards violence, repression and murder that has affected that community for many years. We like to pretend in Scotland anti-Semitism doesn't exist, but it does exist, and we think we're better than that, and there's no need to further discuss or comment on it. However, in the last few months, I've heard comments that would be constructed as anti-Semitic under the definition contained in this motion, from people either from ignorance or design, including easily identifiable dog whistle and anti-Semitism. I've heard such comments both within the county and wider parts of Scotland. This motion, while perhaps not stopping anti-Semitism, at least makes it identifiable and allows those in ignorance to understand it and stop those that say it by design the ability to hide behind an unclear definition. I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Bob Brown.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning. Colleagues, this is an important motion. During the last council session, I had the opportunity to sit on the Tayside Pension Board, and during 2018, some members of that board received an email urging the fund to divest itself of any investments in Israel, and specifically those in a named Israeli bank. This email generated a response from a third party believing that this demand was rooted in anti-Semitism. My general reply to her solicited further comment. Alarmingly, it stated that, and I quote, "It seems that Jews find themselves in a terrible situation where they have certain groups shouting at them that they are not wanted in Britain's streets and should get out. They need to hide their Jewish identity to keep safe. They suffer vile slogans and physical attacks in Britain and around the world." Following this, I spoke, after speaking with the then council leader, Councillor Lyle, spoke with Mrs Simpson to see whether we could adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. However, there was at that time a lack of formal legal definition, and it was a politically charged subject at the time, and we decided that we should delay moving forward. We have all seen the newsreel footage of the events of the last century, the unbelievable inhumanity at places such as Dachau, Bergen-Belsen and Auschwitz. From this was born the concept of crimes against humanity, and those who participated in those crimes and did not escape by their own hand faced the due process of law, something denied to their 6 million victims, and received their just dues. Some camps, Dachau and Auschwitz, for example, remain not just as memorials to the incomprehensible suffering of the innocent, but also as warnings out of history itself of what can happen when prejudice is allowed to run loose, of how easily our humanity can slip. They stand at the end of a long, long road, but make no mistake, if Jews in this country are verbally abused or spat at or assaulted, and we do nothing, we look the other way, then we have taken a step along that same road. And remember, of course, there are still people in this country and around the world who would like to see Hitler's final solution concluded. In a debate in the House of Lords in 2019, former Chief Rabbi, the late Lord Jonathan Sacks, highlighted his concerns. And he said, "Try to imagine 400,000 Jews imprisoned within ghetto walls in the middle of a city. Imagine people passing those walls every day, knowing that behind them thousands were dying or being sent to their deaths, and no one said a word. How did this happen? It happened because in the 19th century, the heart of emancipated Europe, anti-Semitism, once dismissed as a primitive prejudice of the Middle Ages, was reborn." He continued that that is where we are today. Within living memory of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism has returned exactly as it did in the 19th century, just when people had begun to feel that they had finally vanquished the hatreds of the past. Today, there is hardly a country in the world, certainly not a single country in Europe, where Jews feel safe. It is hard to emphasize how serious this is, not just for Jews themselves, but for our shared humanity. And he concluded, a society that tolerates anti-Semitism, that tolerates any hate, has forfeited all moral credibility. You cannot build a future on the malign myths of the past. You cannot sustain freedom based on hostility and hate. I thank and am pleased that Councillor Barrett and Harvey have taken this forward and followed my belief that this council should adopt their definition. It is a small step, but nonetheless an important one. Today we have done something, and today we have not looked the other way. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Braun, for those thoughtful comments. Councillor Con-Stewart.
Thank you, Provost, and my thanks also to Councillor Barrett as the Council's Equalities champion, and to Councillor Harvey for bringing forward this motion today, which I wholeheartedly endorse. It's a small point of clarification which might be of assistance to members and officers should the motion be adopted. For example, when we are organising training or holding local events on the issue, if you compare it with the following motion, there is a sort of short paragraph of definition supported by explanatory guidelines. In this motion, there is a a short paragraph of definition, but the internationally recognised definition of anti-Semitism is also supported by a number of a much larger number of examples to actually exemplify the point that those should be also brought out and referred to when organising events and training and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I'm seeing no other comments, so Councillor Peter Barrett, to sum up, please.
Thanks, Provost. I would like to thank Councillor Harvey and Councillor Braun for their commendable contributions to the debate, and also confirm to Councillor Stewart that the intention of the motion was certainly to include all the examples provided by IHRA with regard to the definition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Members, can we agree the motion subject to that slight tweak in terms of remembrance? Thank you. Item 4.3 is a motion on Islamophobia, and this is also moved by Councillor Peter Barrett as the Equalities Champion.
Thanks, Provost. Once upon a time, you might have compared the frequency or volume of equalities motions coming to council to the number 9 bus in my constituency. But given the way the buses are running now, that wouldn't be appropriate, because if one didn't come along, then no others would come along either. However, to get to the matter in hand, last year the Scottish Parliament's cross-party group on tackling Islamophobia published the findings of their public inquiry into Islamophobia in Scotland. It found that 83% of Muslim respondents said that they'd experienced Islamophobia directly, and with Muslim women more likely to encounter it than men. The inquiry also found 75% of Muslims said Islamophobia is a regular or everyday issue in Scottish society, and with 78% believing it's getting worse. The report has made a series of recommendations, including that Scottish Government should work towards adopting a formal definition of Islamophobia to promote understanding, to encourage reporting, and to indicate its commitment to addressing it. And that's what today's motion seeks to address. And it also reflects the call by my party leader, Alex Cole-Hamilton, who called upon all councils to adopt the APPG definition, a call which was echoed in the SNP local government manifesto. MEND, who are the Muslim Engagement and Development Organisation, a not-for-profit group that aims to work with Muslim and non-Muslim organisations to ensure that anti-Muslim prejudice is regarded just as socially unacceptable as anti-Semitism and other forms of racism and xenophobia, actively encouraged councils to adopt the definition. And the reasons for that were because it provides a starting point in tackling Islamophobia. It shows allyship with the Scottish Muslim communities that are experiencing racism and discrimination, and it shows that Islamophobia will not be tolerated in Scotland. MEND wrote to the council leader following the election, urging the council to adopt the definition, and in their letter they pointed to the appalling statistic of over 80% of Scottish Muslim respondents to the APPG survey having experienced Islamophobia directly, and to Islamophobic attacks in Scotland becoming an increasing common and serious issue, including, for example, in December last year, a neo-Nazi was imprisoned for charges of terrorism for threatening to burn down Fife Islamic Centre. We firmly believe that this is a fundamental first step all councils must take to tackle the critical issue of Islamophobia in a targeted and effective manner. In Perth and Kinross, we have a strong record of working closely with our local Muslim community, from finding practical solutions to deliver Muslim burial ground in Wells Hill Cemetery to meet their specific burial needs, to providing support through our cost of living crisis response and working with local groups like Perth Welfare Society that we can direct support to families facing rising costs of halal meat, to facing down the right-wing thugs of the Scottish Defence League who wanted to foment racism and hatred in our community over the plans for the new mosque. And now, with COVID delaying the construction of the new mosque and with the current mosque too small to accommodate the number of Muslims wanting to attend Friday prayers, I'm delighted and proud that our council is actively engaged and is engaging with the Perth Islamist Society to find an alternative venue to trial Friday prayers during January of next year. As the potential solution, which was circulated to members in a recent briefing, has not yet been formally put to the Perth Islamic Society, could I ask that members keep those details of those discussions to themselves until it has been made? But I would say that it is testament to our equalities team and to the values of inclusiveness and fairness that permeate this council. This motion is submitted to Council in that same spirit and is a further step towards making Perth a fairer, more inclusive space where everyone is respected and appreciated, regardless of race or religion. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Massey to second, please.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Councillor Barrett, for bringing forward this motion. Islamophobia, an exaggerated, irrational fear, hatred and hostility towards Islam and Muslims, perpetrated by negative stereotypes resulting in bias, discrimination of Muslims from civic, social and political life. That was the Centre for American Progress. Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expression of Muslimness and perceived Muslimness, all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims. This month is Islamophobia Awareness Month, and the theme that has been chosen to highlight this year is tackling denial. Islamophobia exists in our society, that cannot be denied. Therefore, tackling denial is important. Why? Because if you allow people to deny the very existence of Islamophobia, then how can we begin to have a sensible conversation about it and therefore tackle this problem? Denial simply shuts down this conversation. The denial of Islamophobia can be seen in many forms in political, social and workspaces. A survey conducted by MEND, Muslim Engagement and Development, of over 1,000 British Muslims asked what aspects are most important to you when you consider a job. After good pay and work-life balance, the third most popular answer was being able to practice my religion at work, with 1/3 of all respondents given this answer. Racism and the lack of cultural awareness in the workplace impacts on a person's career development. Furthermore, women who wore the headscarf at work described it as being a visual marker of difference that was perceived and experienced as to leading to further discrimination. So what can employers do to make the workplace a more inclusive place for Muslim employees and tackle denial? IAM have put together a list of practical suggestions to make the workplace more inclusive for Muslim employees. To promote flexible working hours for religious needs, provide a space for Muslim employees to pray, provide halal food options in canteens, improve recruitment methods to remove unconscious bias, ensure Muslim representation at senior leadership level, and be flexible with dress codes to suit employees' religious beliefs. By putting these actions into place, this will showcase the positive contributions of Muslims in the workplace, champion inclusivity and diversity in the workplace, develop stronger teams based on mutual respect and understanding, and acknowledge the issues that may arise from Islamophobia in the workplace. But let's not forget, we as individuals must look to ourselves. We must all stand up to Islamophobia and be prepared to condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination. Nobody should have to live their life in fear that their faith, ethnicity, or any other identities will make them a target for violence. Let's stand together with our Muslim colleagues and friends to root out Islamophobia wherever it exists. I am pleased to second the motion for Perth and Kinross Council to adopt the APPG definition of Islamophobia. Shukran, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. I don't see any, sorry, apologies, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. I'm certain that everybody in the chamber here detests hate speech or behaviour of any kind. There can be no room for it in this chamber, in this council or anywhere in this country. I fully support anything which makes it clear that behaving in any way that exhibits or expresses hatred towards another person is completely unacceptable, and therefore I'm happy to support both the motion on anti-Semitism and this one on Islamophobia. The Council has a very good track record of working with its partners to ensure that such behaviour is tackled robustly, and I'm certain that we will continue to do so in respect of these two specific aspects of discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor Crawford-Reid next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Obviously very happy to support both these motions, but perhaps the discussion should be widened to consider all ethnic and minority groups, including such as the Sikhs, Hindus, and, dare I say it, Scottish Tories.
I'm not really sure that was entirely appropriate, Councillor Reid. Bailey.
Thank you. The people who proposed and seconded the motion, some of the other people who've spoken have spoken about how there is some level of perhaps denial of the scale of Islamophobia in Scotland. Anyone who wants to speak with me, I can give them a more graphic account of the type of correspondence I received a couple of years ago when I became a public supporter of the mosque in Perth. I can't go into much detail here, but I was even challenged to the extent of whether I was allowed to still serve as a councillor if I'd converted to Islam. That was one of the phone calls I received. I'm sorry, this is quite emotional, but I can only appreciate it. It gives me some small level of appreciation of the discrimination that people who are actually in that group face. If I face that discrimination by just standing in solidarity with them, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey. Councillor Peter Barrett, to sum up.
Thanks again, Provost. I want to thank all the members who've spoken to this motion and the two previous ones. I think as a council, we are stronger and make a bigger impact in the communities that we serve when we're able to draw on the different strands from different political perspectives and from different life experiences, but able to pull on those strands to pull us forward in the same direction. And I'm really grateful to members for their contributions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Members, can we agree the motion? Thank you very much, members. I just want to thank members for all of their contributions and all of the important motions today, and with the cross-party spirit on which all were approached. So thank you very much to everyone. I'm going to take the outstanding business statement, and then I'm going to take a comfort break to allow people to have a quick recess before we move on to the next substantive set of business items. So item 5 is the outstanding business statement. Are there any questions on the outstanding business statement? Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. The question I have is for if there's any update that could be provided to the Chamber and the residents of West Kinross with regard to item number 4, which was the assessment and to work with the developer to look at the road and footpath at the holdings based on the development that we deviated from the local plan to approve last time around. Thank you.
Executive Director.
Good morning, Councillor Bailey. Work is still underway. Discussions are ongoing with the developer as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions on the outstanding business statement. No. Okay, members, can we agree the outstanding business statement? Thank you. Right, members, we shall have a recess for... Oh, sorry, Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. A few IT problems. It wasn't my queue wasn't sending, unfortunately. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. The outstanding business statement. A couple of meetings ago, the full council, I put in a motion for the leader to write to the Scottish Government regarding a review of the Scottish Outdoor Access Code. I don't see anything there, and I'm just wondering if the leader did do that and whether he got a reply, please. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor James, I understand that we have received reply and that is due to be circulated to members, but I'll hand over to Leader of the Council just in case he wishes to add anything further.
Yes, thanks, Councillor James. As instructed or asked, I did write and I have received a reply. I spoke to Democratic Services this week when I saw it wasn't here, wondering what the best way to pass round the reply was, and after speaking to them, we'll circulate it to all members. It was the same with the other requests that I had as well, which I've had a response to as well about membership of the IJB. So quite happy to share them with you. It was just to find out a form of giving it, should it come through council again or not. So that's been a little delay. So apologise for that.
No, thanks very much.
No problem. And I agreed with Leader of the Council this morning that we would circulate that, so it will be circulated through committee services. There being no other questions. Last call. No. Right. We shall have a short recess and reconvene at 11:45. Thank you. Councillors, can we resume our seats, please? Thank you. Item 6 is the 4th Local Child Poverty Action Report, and Claire Mailer, the Executive Lead for Strategic Planning and Transformation, is going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost. Councillors, as you are all aware, in September, Council was updated on actions underway in response to the current cost of living crisis. Additional funding to support communities was agreed, a cost of living strategy setting out our commitments to support communities was approved, and we agreed to support the establishment of an anti-poverty task force. Good progress has been made in these areas in the short time since that meeting. This report takes a longer term, more strategic view of the work that is underway and planned to tackle and mitigate child poverty in the area. It provides Council with an update on work that is ongoing by the councils and its partners to mitigate the impacts of child poverty and indeed our plans going forward. The Council is asked to note we've moved to a 4-year delivery plan to enable us to take a more strategic and ambitious approach to shifting the dial on child poverty than is possible with annual planning cycles. Our Child Poverty Delivery Plan 22 to 26, which is included in the report, aligns with Best Start Bright Futures, the Child Poverty Delivery Plan of the Scottish Government, which covers the same reporting period. We will issue an annual Children's Scorecard, an update report which will report on our progress and lessons learned from implementing the delivery plan. And a link to the Children's Scorecard is included within the report with more detailed information. In the words of the Poverty Alliance, nothing about us without us is for us. We continue to maintain our commitment to designing and delivering services through the eyes of people with lived experience of poverty. Our strategy has been developed using the perspective of lived experience from commissioned research that Professor McKendrick and his team conducted for us. We know that there are a number of issues particular to Perth and Kinross that we must face into around the low paid economy, gender pay gap and the rural poverty premium, with transport, childcare and access to services all made more challenging in our rural areas. The strategy has 4 key objectives: to provide opportunities and support needed to enter, sustain and progress in work around employability and skills, housing and economic opportunity, connectivity and childcare. To maximise the support available to families to lead dignified lives and to meet their basic needs. This is around person-centred support, social security and income maximisation activity. Supporting the next generation to survive and thrive, and to deliver a one council, whole family, whole community approach to connecting children and their families to the help and support that they need to mitigate and to move beyond poverty. There has been a lot of hard work and effort across the council and beyond to mitigate the worst effects of child poverty. But key to this plan is to take a longer term strategic view and to move towards a preventative approach rather than a reactive one. While no single service or agency has the power to end child poverty, there is much that we can all do collectively. With over 5,155 children here in Perth and Kinross living in poverty, we have individual and collective responsibility to keep this important issue at the forefront of all of our work. You will see from the report today that numerous services across the council are involved in all of the work that is ongoing. Not all officers are here on the call today, but we will do, those of us that are here will do our best to answer any questions you have. An elective member briefing and workshop session has been or will be arranged. Unfortunately, we had to reschedule Tuesday afternoon session, and I would really encourage you all to attend if possible for a more detailed discussion on this important work. And the team are here and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Donaldson, you have a couple of questions.
Thank you, Provost. I have 2 questions. The second I'll leave until later on, and it may be that somebody else will cover that point. My first question relates to figures. Above all, this is a report and paper that focuses on the present and what action we can take going forward. And it is about action. Nonetheless, the reality is that in terms of the stated figures, the position may appear to get worse before it gets better. And I turn to page 43, and the point I specifically do want to ask, we have a current figure we're showing of child poverty of 22.6%. That's 5,155 young people in Perth and Kinross. But that's taken for 2019-2020. Now, understandably, because of the pandemic, the figures subsequently are not robust enough, are not perhaps reliable enough, with, in particular, council officials being deployed during other areas during the pandemic. What I would do want to ask, though, is, one, when we can get verifiable figures for 2022-2023, what is the cut-off point? And given surging inflation, increased mortgage rates, especially households on fixed mortgages, I think clearly that figure of 5,155, 22.6%, will inevitably have increased. Does Claire Mailer or Margaret Lynch have a broad estimate of where we stand right now?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Donaldson. Page, and I think your point that you make is well made in terms of the current figure that we're reporting of 5,155. I think there's no doubt. I think that everybody in the room here will appreciate, given the current situation with the cost of living crisis, more and more households are being forced into poverty and experiencing financial hardship. So when we do receive the refreshed figures, which we anticipate will be March of next year, we do anticipate that there will be, unfortunately and sadly and worryingly, an increase in that figure. Page 35 of the pack in the report provides an explanation as to why we have had to take figures from the previous year. This is a national situation that we've got. Reporting was made more challenging during COVID for the reasons outlined there. The change in the mode of interviewing from face-to-face to telephone, changes in the methods used to elicit responses from survey participants, and also changing people's behaviours and circumstances. What I would also say is that we do, alongside the qualitative information, we're obviously doing a lot of work. You can see within the children's scorecard quite a detailed sort of breakdown in terms of the information that we have available here in Perth and Kinross. I would encourage you, I think it's on the link on page 36 within the report, gives a link to the children's scorecard. That does give an overview in terms of the range of indicators that we are using here to measure child poverty, the information that we've already got and the targets that we've got against that. So we'd encourage you to have a look at those. In terms of your question, could I make an estimate of what the current figure is? I would say the answer to that is no. I think that would be unwise of me to do that at this stage, other than absolutely I would agree with you that it's going to be, we know that it will be higher than the figure that has been reported.
I say thanks, and that's understandable. You don't want to make an estimate, but I think inevitably it's going to be higher. As a follow-up, and this is not my second question, could I just also ask, it's not in the report or the appendix, it's not in the scorecard. I know the data is probably March 2020, but do we have, even at that point, a map of all the wards in Perth and Kinross? I know individual councillors can get their ward profiles, all that type of thing, but so we can get an overview between the wards, because quite clearly this is not an issue just in parts of Perth City, but also in, I'm aware obviously of the problems in parts of Strathern, in South Crieff, Blairgowrie and Rattray, but it's helpful to have that information in terms of areas that we prioritise. Thank you.
Yes. Councillors will recall probably around and about this time last year we shared child poverty ward profiles. Those of you that were here, we shared that with all elected members. In May of this year, we shared ward profiles sort of more broadly with some other data and indicators. We will be refreshing those and we will share those with you. What we will do within the briefing that is due to come out and at the elected member child poverty briefing that we've got planned before the end of the year, we'll share that more detailed information with you. And I think we will endeavour to include that as an appendix to future reports.
Thanks, Claire.
Okay, thank you. We've got quite a lot of questions from members, so if members and officers can all keep their questions and answers concise, we'll get through them in an expeditious manner. Councillor Forbes, next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Claire, I'm in the appendix, I'm on page 20, and it's the first paragraph. Now, I've looked at this over and over again, and I must be missing something really obvious, so be kind to me if I am. It says the team that found that almost all households with school meal debt qualified for free school meals. I would have thought if there's a school meal debt, then clearly they would qualify for free school meals, and it wouldn't just be almost all, it would be all. Am I missing something really obvious?
It's Lynn Brady on the call. Would you be able to respond to that question, please, Lynn?
Yes, yeah. The majority of people, as the report says, were entitled to free school meals, but sometimes there are situations where people don't qualify for it, and for a number of reasons. In some situations where people who perhaps can pay just don't pay. There's not many people like that, but that is the reality of it. But we endeavour to continue to maximise take up of free school meals proactively and reactively as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. I thought it was further down the queue, so it caught me slightly by surprise there. On page 40, there's a bullet referring to stigma and has reference to many families experiencing stigma when accessing supports. I wanted to know if there'd been any specific improvements made to address this with regard to referral mechanisms and agencies, cash first supports and staff training, etc. The link between addressing stigma and the experiences of priority parents section, which follows it, doesn't seem to have been made.
Sheena.
Thank you very much, Provost. Councillor Barrett, in relation to some of the actions that we have undertaken to help mitigate the potential of stigma, I can confirm that the payment of school clothing grants, for example, directly into parents' bank accounts, removes the previous approach, which was around vouchers or indeed gyros, which then had to be cashed, and identified families in shops and post offices, for example, as being in receipt of those particular clothing grants. And free school meals are loaded onto cards in the same way that paid meals are, thus reducing the differential and the potential then for stigma around school pupils who are accessing free school meals on the basis of qualifying benefits, as opposed to those that would access free school meals across P1 to 4 as a universal entitlement. And we've also, across Education and Children's Services, sought consent from parents at the point of application for free school meals and school clothing grants to then share their details directly with colleagues in the Welfare Rights team. So this allows us to work very closely with Welfare Rights, where we can then provide collectively additional assistance that may be required for some of the families, and allows us to be proactive and take steps to maximise income, for example. So I hope those are some helpful examples for you in terms of how we have been working proactively in that particular area. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Provost. And if you could just have a very quick follow-up with regard to what Mrs. Devlin said, and also the response to the previous question, you know, are there capacity issues which need to be addressed in terms of how the welfare rights team can respond to referrals coming through these sources?
Claire Mellon.
Thank you. And I think just a couple of other points just in terms of the stigma. Just a reminder to Council that the Anti-Poverty Task Force recently established, absolutely within its remit, is championing the reduction in poverty levels and indeed associated stigmas. I think the cost of living crisis has raised a lot of awareness amongst sort of, the general population, and I think we probably are seeing less stigma than we have done in the past. As Sheena Devlin has outlined, the bulk of the money available to mitigate the cost of living crisis is being provided via cash first approaches, and we also are working with the Improvement Service and colleagues in NHS Tayside in terms of some awareness sessions you'll see within the report due to take place before the end of March of next year. But a range of sessions and awareness raising is absolutely underway. With regards to the capacity, within the welfare rights team, obviously this is an area that we continue to keep under review. Additional capacity absolutely has been provided via the housing team. Workloads continue to be monitored. There's no doubt that the team are absolutely stretched. Increases in workloads, a huge amount of work that there is underway by the team. I think Lynn and Nick are excellent in terms of the information sharing, awareness raising to ensure that everybody in frontline services is aware of and can signpost and indeed support people who are struggling financially.
Thank you, Claire Miller. Apologies, Bailey. There is a slight delay on some of my chat. You're next.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for the report. And I think my question has a good segue from the second of Councillor Barrett's there. I was wanting to explore that in a broader sense, actually. So my question is, are all of the teams responsible for delivering on this child poverty plan fully funded to do so through to 2026? And if there is any shortfall, what is that shortfall and where is it? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think, as I probably said within my opening statements, and as I certainly have said at Council before, tackling, mitigating the impacts of poverty absolutely is everybody's responsibility. All frontline teams are absolutely involved in this. We have got capacity issues across many areas of services, not just within the Council, but certainly within third sector in terms of the increase in terms of volume and demand. We will all be collectively involved in the budget setting process going forward. As you are aware, poverty has been identified as one of the key priorities within the corporate plan, and we will continue to work with Council as Officers Council and indeed the wider leadership team to ensure that we have got the right resources in the right place, delivering on the key priorities. But I can't give a detailed overview in terms of the where we'll be through the budget process.
Yeah.
So would I thank you for the answer there. So would I be right in understanding that you don't have that surety of funding all the way till 2026 as things stand?
Not at this stage, not across every single team. We're having budget discussions which everybody will be involved in going forward. But again, I think the priority is there in terms of tackling poverty, and a lot of work that we are doing through the Transformation and Change programme is reviewing how we work, how we can operate more efficiently to free up frontline teams' capacity to focus on these really important areas.
Thank you. Councillor McCall next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I have a question in a few parts, but they're all related together, if I may. Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you very much for this report. I welcome it, and I would like to commend our officers for their ongoing work to tackle child poverty across Perth and Kinross and the ongoing commitment to continue to do so. I also note I'm very pleased that the 22 families who make up the priority parents group provide their lived experience evidence, crucial in my opinion. But can I ask how many of these families have a child with a disability or a health condition that incurs additional living costs? And on that same vein, For many children with a disability and/or health condition, the drift into poverty is sometimes incremental from birth, and by the time the child is entering the education system, it's become normalised and may not be acknowledged as a child poverty situation by the family concerned. So on page 37, there's a reference to the Child Poverty Working Group being refreshed, and it will include third sector. Can I ask, therefore, if this includes specialist organisations and charities that support children and families, very often from birth, children and family where the children have disabilities and health conditions, and these organisations may be best placed to identify both the triggers for child poverty associated with a specific disability or health condition, and perhaps can offer specific or specialist mitigations that could alleviate poverty for the children and families they support. And also, assuming that these organisations will be able to inform the work of the Child Poverty Working Group, can I get reassurance that the desired performance against the fourth indicator on table 41, which I'll read out in a minute just to remind everybody, will offer a clear route for these organisations to initiate referrals, either directly or via another defined route? And the fourth indicator is evidence of multidisciplinary working across mental health, learning disabilities, and addictions. But can I also ask, finally, Provost, you'll be pleased to know, that some consideration be given to the inclusion of physical and sensory disabilities and health conditions in that particular criteria, or indicator, sorry.
Did you get all of that?
They're all kind of entwined together, Claire. Do you want me to?
It's coming on, there we go. Right, thank you for your question, Councillor McCall. What I might say is that we will come back and give you more detailed information. Margaret Lynch, our Child Poverty Coordinator, is on the call. Margaret, if you could maybe just give a very high-level overview, but I do accept, I think, probably more detailed information within a wider briefing would be helpful, rather than really getting too much into the detail. Thank you, Margaret.
Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, there were families amongst the 22 who took part in the qualitative research who had a disabled family member, but I will need to get back to you to find out if there were families with a disabled child specifically. We did a literature search in Scotland and somewhat astonishingly found that there is no properly conducted research in Scotland into the poverty challenges faced by parents with a disabled child. We've raised that with the Improvement Service and are looking into following that up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I'm happy to get a more detailed briefing later. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, and thank you to officers to provide that later on. Councillor Kigali, you have questions.
Yes, am I okay to go through with both of them? So my first question is on the gender pay gap statistic and how that's being worked out, because if it's just gross pay, that's a very different problem to solve compared to whether that's comparable jobs. So if we could have some clarity on how that's actually calculated, it'd be quite helpful.
Thank you. I'll refer to Margaret again, if that's okay.
The gender pay gap figures were calculated by the Scottish Government, but I'll get back to you with more detail on that after today's meeting.
Okay, so I'll go ahead. My second question is whether we've got data on the leading markers for entry into long-term poverty in PKC, so we can try and deal with these issues at their root, or even, hopefully before they actually, or these families really fall into poverty, because a lot of fantastic work's obviously been going into helping these families when they're there, but if we can stop them getting there in the first place, that'd be even more fantastic. So if we could know what those leading markers are, that'd be quite helpful.
Yeah, and again, I think in answer to that question, I think we'll provide more detailed information within the briefing, but absolutely I would sort of just reassure Council we're absolutely live to the preventative work. All frontline staff and services that are involved out there within our communities supporting families and households are very live to the potential triggers to poverty, and that upfront early intervention work is absolutely key. We've got a range of services. Sheena Devlin's given you an overview in terms of all of the work that schools undertake undertake. They work very, very closely through the school's debt with the welfare rights team to ensure that we can step in and give support. On the call today, we've possibly got Alison Seggy and indeed Jamie from our economic development and employability team. Lots of support that go within there to support families. The housing team are very live to when tenants or residents fall into debt. We obviously sort of pick up through some of the kind of transport and childcare issues in terms of some of these kind of areas where we need to intervene early to prevent a household falling into poverty. So as I say, a huge area there in terms of some of these kind of key triggers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Provost, and thanks for the report, Claire. Reference is made in the covering report and in the report itself into the priority families that have been involved in this process, and the definition given is lone parents, families with a disabled family member, minority ethnic families, large families, families with a young mother, and families with a child under 1 year of age. There's a group missing from that, and I just wanted to make sure that this has been taken into consideration and reflected, and that is families where either drug or substance or alcohol abuse is a feature, perhaps among the parent, and the child is therefore affected. And I just wondered if you can just clarify whether that issue specifically is on the radar, so to speak.
Yeah, I think my first response to that is absolutely everything is on the radar, and certainly families with substance use issues, or indeed, mental health, health and well-being challenges will fit within all of these different categories. The particular groups here that you see are those that we really are encouraged and supported to target through the Scottish Government's strategy. And absolutely, I think our experience are these are the families that are more at risk of poverty. But the key kind of features that you've described and key challenges and issues that families face fit with across all of these groups. So nothing is off the radar. We support all families and all teams involved across the Health and Social Care Partnership and our frontline teams, children's services and indeed the housing teams, welfare rights are all obviously live to these particular areas.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Provost. It was just two sort of quick points of clarification. In the report under the heading of individuals, departments and the council with regards to residents' perception of the council, the quote is the council tended to be viewed more negatively. I just wondered if that perception had been broken down in any sense in terms of trying to get some understanding what was causing that negativity. And the other point in clarification was under the heading of data challenges, it's recognised that the info on ethnic minorities is based on the 2011 census, which is obviously sort of considerably out of date. I just wondered when does the council get the latest information from this year's census? Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of your first question in relation to the council being viewed more negatively, I think it was really interesting. And again, there is a link within the report to the lived experience report, which gives a lot more detail than is covered within the covering report. We certainly found that the council in its entirety probably has more of a negative view, but actually when we sort of drilled down on an individual officer, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. So the council, I suppose as an organisation, was being seen to be sort of more remote and quite a big bureaucratic organisation, but at the point that households were having direct contact with frontline officers, the experience was overwhelmingly positive. And again, you'll see within the report the liaison and the integration and the collaboration between teams in terms of working together to deliver a whole family approach was really, really positive as well. I think what we probably have found more recently, you can see that the report was was undertaken during 2021. I think more generally as a council, I think the reputation in terms of our response during COVID, and certainly some of the work that many of us have been involved in recent months to get out there, engage with communities as a senior leadership team, certainly to engage with sort of communities, the third sector and the business communities, I think is really helping to sort of foster a more collaborative partnership approach and sort of break down some of those potential perceptions that there have been in the past about the council. We'll just need to continue to collectively work on that.
Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. My question's on page 43. There is a table there about income from employment. And in the second row of statistics, there's a figure there of 8.2% are underemployed and that they would like to work more hours. Given the number of businesses who state they're crying out for staff, this seems a bit at odds with my perception anyway of what is the situation. I just wondered if this was more hours in their current job or an inability to get a second job, and if you had any details about what factors are preventing families from working more hours where they want to. Thank you.
Okay, probably feels like sort of a straightforward question. I think there's a number of complexities that sit behind that. Not every household has got their own sort of unique circumstances. So that could be a range of factors such as childcare, transport, hours of work, skills and so on. So we will include, I think, a wee bit more detail. So when we have the more detailed briefing session, we can provide you with more detailed information on what sits behind that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bailey Williamson.
Thank you, Provost. My question is about, you mentioned earlier about people getting access to services, and are we working on trying to encourage more people to use remote access to get into services, try and take away the financial impact of possibly coming into Perth? And if you don't mind me, a second question, is there any work going on with Tayside contracts around about trying to use a central production unit to create meals to get into households that can't possibly afford to feed themselves?
Thank you, Councillor Williamson, Bailey Williamson. In terms of access to services and remote access, as you will be aware, we've kind of held some sort of online sessions, certainly with people within Highland Perthshire. We are working very, very closely to ensure sort of kind of wider access, and I think Teams and COVID has really supported that. So I think we're having far greater sort of engagement and attendance through the use of online drop-in sessions, online services, and indeed sort of engagement. We've got a huge amount of work that is undertaken across the council, both within education and children's services, and indeed more widely in terms of our digital inclusion activity. We focus very, very heavily on that. And what I would also advise you is we currently have got a customer services review underway as part of the transformation and change strategy, and access to services will absolutely be key there. What we also have is a real push in some areas for greater visibility of officers. So it's that balance between some people really wanting to engage in terms of online, ensuring that they've got the digital skills to do that and indeed the technology, but also where needed that we can be there and have that kind of visible face-to-face contact. So that real balance that needs to be struck. In terms of Tayside contracts, I'm not sure if any of my colleagues are able to answer the particular question. If not, we will get back to you with a response to that after council.
I think that'll need to be a response afterwards. Okay. Councillor Allen, you have a comment. It's now a question. Yes.
No, it will be a question. I'm looking at the background issues, and specifically on page 21 at 4.8, you mentioned that the data and the feedback received from parents in these reports confirmed stigma associated with poverty was getting in the way of people seeking help. I just want to kind of challenge the word stigma there. Does that hide people who don't come forward because, not because of stigmatisation, but because they've got personal endeavour, personal experience, personal pride, a strive to succeed without the help? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think the answer to that in some cases could be that people will be embarrassed or have personal pride and not want to step forward and ask for help across all services. And I think what has again been a positive interaction through COVID is that we have reached out and undertaken welfare checks that have more generally across the organisation. A lot of work that the team did in terms of the food response and also the housing team in terms of welfare checks and indeed welfare rights colleagues, I think has really kind of broken down those barriers and said, you know, here we are, we're here to help. We're not here to sort of criticise because there's a debt issue. We're here to support and help. And I do think, again, we are discussing poverty, we are discussing the cost of living more openly. It's affecting every single household, not just a small proportion of the population. And I think that really has helped to break down the barriers. And I think we've all got that responsibility to reach out, have these conversations. I know Lynn and Nick have run a few sessions, certainly elected member session, in terms of how do we have those conversations when members of the public are speaking to us and give them the signposting and support that they need. So yes, I think we're doing some really good work, but we cannot be complacent and we need to continue to do that. We've got a comprehensive comms plan and we're ensuring that we're getting as wide a reach as we possibly can through that so people know where to seek support.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson, you have a further question?
Oh, thank you, Professor. It was just about the response to my second question about when the council might hope to obtain the most up-to-date information from the latest census.
Apologies, I realised I hadn't answered that as we moved on. I'm not sure if Margaret Lynch is able to answer that question.
I mean, I would expect it's going to be sometime next year, but I don't know exactly. We'll follow that up.
Next year.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, you have a further question?
Thank you. Right. Councillor Kurgali referred to the gender pay gap. I think it has to be said with quite clearly, you know, the fact that Perth and Kinross is top of the league table and Scotland is #1 really is something of concern, and the figures are really quite dramatic. But a specific question I want to ask is on average earnings. In 2019, the pay gap, as you can see on page 32 of the report, was £11.90. In 2020, it's doubled to £24. And then in 2021, it's almost doubled again to £47.10. Now that, to me, just doing quick calculation, is compared to the Scottish average earnings in Perth and Kinross are very nearly 8% below the Scottish average. So I'd like to ask Claire, what is the reason for that? Is it above all the structure of the workforce in Perth and Kinross and the greater reliance on agriculture and hospitality?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I think you have probably answered your own question there in terms of we have got particular challenges, particularly in rural Perthshire, precarious employment, low paid employment within the sectors that you have just described absolutely contribute to that. And I think just sort of more generally in terms of the longer term sort of strategic approach, this Child Poverty Action Plan and the work does not sit in isolation. If we all consider the recently considered corporate plan and the priorities within there, poverty absolutely sits there, but as a council we also have got the economic wellbeing plan. That is a key enabler and preventer in terms of this agenda, so there's much that sits within that. As I say, we have got our economic development team very heavily involved in this agenda, and it's the interrelationship of all of these key priorities of the council that really work to sort of addressing and tackling some of these deep-rooted sort of issues.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson with the final question.
Thank you, Provost. The most important part of this paper, and it's a very sobering paper, I thought was on page 44, when you give us the crunch issues. Now, the crunch issues are all things I would argue are slightly out with this council's control, and they're actually, it's really up to national government to deal with. And given the sobering figures we have in this report, I'm wondering what process is there for what we are seeing in front of us today to actually feed up to the decision makers in national government, both within Scotland and within the UK. Because if it was me getting these sort of figures in front of me and I was responsible for policies within the national government, I'd be both embarrassed and shocked, and we'd be looking at actions, taking actions to deal with it. So can you tell me what actually happens to these reports if they get fed up to people that can actually make a difference to child poverty within, not just within Perth and Kinross, but within Scotland?
So if you want to take the bit about council's ability to engage.
Okay, thank you. A very good question there. I think in terms of the crunch issues, I would go back to the very early statement I said in terms of not one single organisation or individual team or service can tackle poverty alone. This is a collective responsibility at an individual and indeed a local, community, organisational council, Scottish Government, third sector and indeed business. And in response to Councillor Donaldson's earlier question, I probably should have given some overview in terms of the work that the Anti-Poverty Task Force are undertaking. We are engaging very heavily with our local businesses, probably to a greater extent. They are very, very wedded to this important agenda item in terms of supporting, but also in terms of discussions round and about the living wage. We absolutely engage very, very closely with the Improvement Service and indeed with the Scottish Government. They are obviously live to and aware of the particular issues here in Perth and Kinross. Myself and Councillor Lane were recently attended a cost of living crisis summit with local MSPs. Carol Hendry and I recently attended a third sector cost of living crisis event, which we had local MSPs there, and very much we're talking about the local issues that we're facing. And Barbara Renton and I were due to meet with the Scottish Government's Director of Child Poverty, who was due to pay a visit here in Perth and Kinross on Friday. Unfortunately, that has just this morning been cancelled, but we will get that back in the diary very soon. We feed this report into the Scottish Government and we get direct feedback from the Improvement Service in terms of what's happening. So yes, that two-way communication and that influencing role that we collectively have is at the forefront here, and that is probably very good dialogue that is underway for us to inform, I think, the kind of the strategy, the Scottish Government strategy, not just us as a local authority but all others, but also for us to then inform the work that's happening on the ground out there within our communities.
Thank you, Claire and officers, for the answers, and thank you, members, for the questions. I'm going to go to the Leader of the Council to move the report.
Thanks, Provost. So Provost, Baileys and fellow councillors, I'm glad that that report instigated a lot of comment and questioning, and it shows that across this chamber we're looking to deal with this problem within our compass, within Perth and Kinross, and it is the root causes of it lie out with, many of them lie way out with Perth and Kinross, but we are coming together across this chamber to deal with what we can, with what's in front of us here. So thank you for all your questions and thank you for your interest, and with the support that we've already done to help deal with, not deal with poverty, which we're trying to do, but also doing the sticking plaster with dealing with the immediacy of the poverty and the cost of living crisis, which we as a council altogether have unanimously put extra funding in, and I'm sure we'll do so, and it will be helpful to everyone within our within the local authority. So it doesn't give me great pleasure to move this local child poverty action plan, because we have to do it, and I wish we didn't have to do it. But it is a good report. It sets out the work we have engaged over the past year and our future focus in mitigating the effects of child poverty. This is the 4th child poverty action plan that we have been asked to approve at Council and comes at a critical time given the current cost of living crisis and all the activity we are engaged in to respond to this. We have followed up on the commitment made in September to establish a task force. This has been formed with good support from businesses, third sector partners, and we have also seen a good response from communities to the additional funding for communities, food and warm spaces. In terms of child poverty, we know that in 2020, 5,155 children in Perth and Kinross were living in poverty, and the effects of the pandemic and more recent cost of living crisis can only have worsened this number, as has been alluded to several times within the chamber. That's at least 1 in 5 children, but probably many more that are living in poverty. It is important that whilst we are caught up in the immediate need in response to the cost of living crisis, we must not lose sight of our statutory duty and moral obligation to work to reduce child poverty over the longer term in any way we can. I am pleased to note that this report takes a strategic approach, outlining a plan for the next 4 years to face some of the underlying causes specific to Perth and Kinross. It is also good to see that this plan has been informed by lived experience from residents of Perth and Kinross, real people sharing real experiences of low paid work, childcare issues, transport problems, accessing services and many more. Although this feedback is often difficult to hear, these voices must be at the heart of our approach, telling us what works and what doesn't. I look forward to seeing the first update of the children's scorecard in the near future. I know officers are currently preparing this, as it will further help us determine what's working and where we need to focus. And also focus our resources. The plan also outlines a first iteration of an offer for families affected by poverty, developed along the lines of the Perth and Kinross offer. It is important to recognise that council officers, elected members, community groups and individuals working alone cannot solve the wretched issue of child poverty. But we're working together, pooling our resources and expertise, we can and must reduce that 5,155 as much as we can, which is within our gift. At this point, I'd like to obviously thank all the councillors who supported setting up the task force and who have taken part on it already. But I think that all of us and members of the public should pay great tribute to Claire, Carol and her team for the great work they've done in such a short space of time. Also, Lynn Brady, Nicola Sutherland and their team for getting the money out the door, which we've been praised for by the third sector already for the speed of the response. So without these officers and their great work, we couldn't be in the good position that Perth and Kinross is to tackle this problem. Thank you very much. Happy to move this report.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Councillor McCune to second.
Thank you, Provost, Baileys and fellow councillors. In seconding this paper, I'd like to thank officers for their hard work in putting together this 4th local child poverty action report and child poverty delivery plan for 22-26. Without the level of detail it contains and its focus on lived experience, we as a council would not be in a position to address the very serious consequences child poverty creates in our communities. Child poverty is increasing in Perth and Kinross. Child poverty is increasing, and that is without factoring COVID, the cost of living and economic crisis. We as a council must use our influence to make a real and lasting difference. As a council, we unanimously agreed to establish the Anti-Poverty Task Force, which will strengthen collaborative working with our key partners, essential for any plan's success. It is essential we have the specific data for Perth and Kinross, and if we are to solve the problems which cause poverty here. So I applaud the inclusion of the lived experienced evidence and the measured child poverty project in the plan, and the use of this data to create a children's scorecard, an essential step, as only through using this monitoring tool will we truly know if our interventions have any effect. We know that stigma stops families seeking help. Perth and Kinross is below average income economy with unacceptable in-work poverty and uptake of the living wage. Living in the circumstances that creates poverty has a huge negative impact on mental health and well-being. People and communities need help to build inclusive communities. We have challenges as a council to create affordable homes, childcare that supports working and transport options to improve employment opportunities. Our draft corporate plan and the local outcome improvement plan both highlight tackling poverty as a priority for this council as we aim to reduce the number of children in poverty, help with the cost of living pressures, maximise income from all sources, and work with businesses to increase levels of real living wage pay. This report sets out the Council's commitment to tackling child poverty, demonstrates our current understanding of the challenges ahead, where we need to focus and take action, and how it is essential we work collaboratively with our partners and those experiencing poverty to ensure child poverty is minimised and all can live well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Bailey McLaren with the first comment.
Thank you, Provost. My comment is merely to commend the officers who are involved in the daily business of dealing with this grim issue. And I'm sure all my colleagues will agree with me. We commend them for their continual hard work in these challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey McLaren. I'm sure we all echo those comments. Councillor Leishman.
Thank you, Provost, and also to Claire Mailer for the comprehensive report and for all the vital work that your team are carrying out. One of the councillors in question spoke about root causes. That ties in nicely with my comment. 3 years into COVID and we have transitioned from a health crisis into a full-blown economic catastrophe. Over a decade's worth of austerity, exacerbated by the way this Conservative government has dealt with COVID, has led to the current economic and societal situation we are in, and has shaped the widening of inequalities that we are likely to see for the next decade, and tragically probably more. These current and future inequalities are a product of the richest in our society becoming richer, while ordinary people have barely gotten by these last 3 years. There is no doubt in that we are a wealthy country that has a lot of poor people living in it. The belief of social inequality being needed in order to drive prosperity should be consigned to history for what it is, cruel ideology. The poverty in our communities is caused by inequalities that occur when there are unevenly distributed resources in society. Food prices are going up, energy bills are going up, house prices are going up, rent is going up. Everything is going up except people's wages. But people like the Governor of the Bank of England are telling us that we need to show wage restraint, or even more ridiculously, Conservative politicians offering the advice of working longer hours, or even more insultingly, work harder. The specific challenges we face in Perth and Kinross of having a low-paid economy, a widening pay gap with the rest of Scotland and a significant gender pay gap are not acts of God or some sort of natural disaster. When stifled wages are coupled with rampaging inflation, a new strata of society is created. This is called the in-work poor. People are working in full-time jobs and not being paid enough to heat their home, to feed themselves and their family, or provide their children with the basics, unless they themselves go without. Fewer households in Perth and Kinross have access to social housing, and 1 in 3 private tenants experience fuel poverty. So, it's inevitable that this will mean children going to bed hungry, wrapped up in layers of clothing to stave off the cold. That's not a philosophical debate to have in these chambers. It's real life for people in our wards. Happiness is not an emotion Perth and Kinross Labour have while reading this document, but we are relieved at some of the steps taken and achievements made in the Child Poverty Action Report. We not only approve the objectives of the plan, but also the Council's grasp of the problems our people face and the commitment to tackling child poverty throughout Perth and Kinross. The report also says no single service or agency has the power to end child poverty. As well as collaborative working between the Council, NHS Tayside and the Community Planning Partnership, we also need social forces to act as agents of change for our society and elect a government that doesn't choose disastrous economic policies that drive more children into poverty. That would be a powerful step in achieving a more equal and fairer country that doesn't consign millions to hardship and disadvantage.
Thank you, Councillor Caroline Shires.
Thank you, Provost. I too would like to thank officers for this report, and I'm very supportive of all the strategic aims and especially moving to a longer term plan, something all of us in this chamber want to see addressed. I note the role of our community planning partners as a key to developing the plan and taking it forward, and I was really encouraged to see so many partners around the table at the first Anti-Poverty Task Force. I thank the Leader of the Council for establishment of the task force and look forward to, on behalf of our group, playing my part. I too would like to thank officers, as highlighted in the report, for the outstanding work done by individuals and teams across the council, which makes such a huge difference. And I really hope that those officers hear the comments that are being made across the chamber today. I would also echo the comments from the Leader of the Council and others about the humbling approach from our communities who stepped up during COVID and have done so again during this cost of living crisis. A recent report by Audit Scotland looking at child poverty across Scotland highlighted the need for the Scottish Government to ensure that all public sector partners are focused on the prevention of child poverty and ensuring long-term measures are in place and not just sticking plaster approaches, which none of us want to use if we can avoid it. This must be a crucial approach that we must ensure underpins our planning and efforts, along with keeping a check that what we're doing is making a real difference to people and ensuring that the views of children and families are heard. We also need a fair funding settlement for local councils in order that we can deliver the on-the-ground measures needed to break the cycles of poverty which have blighted too many families for too many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Councillor Reddick.
Thank you, Provost. 5,155 children in poverty in Perth and Kinross, in a relatively wealthy country. It's just not right. It doesn't matter how you throw it up, how you see it fall, how you shuffle it about. It is not right. And it will get worse if it not already has as a result of the current cost of living crisis. I see it every day as I go about the ward. And it's not as some people would have you think, not necessarily any in this chamber, I have to say, it's not lazy parents and feckless parenting. It's people who are ill or disadvantaged or who are working hard for low wages that are not consistent with the high costs of living. As this report says, no one agency or service can stop child poverty, but it's important that we do what we can. For example, the 104,000 that we put in for holiday activity clubs will at least help a bit at the edges, and other things that we've done since. Free school meals in nursery and up to primary 5, hopefully to be extended in the not too distant future in primary school, also help. I would also like to, as has already been said, but I'd also like to commend Lynn Brady and Nicola Sutherland from our welfare rights team, who are absolutely superb. And we need to make sure that as our council, we give them the tools that they need to carry on that good work. But lastly, I just want to quote the Chief Executive, who said on the day that we were all elected that we're going to have hard choices to make. He said the choices would be between poverty and potholes. I don't think he meant that quite literally, and neither do I. But that is the nature of the choice that we're going to have to make over the next 2 or 3 or longer difficult years. I know which choice I'm going to make, and it's to try and help people who are most in need throughout Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reddick. Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Provost. I'm grateful to officers for this report and for the excellent work that's been done by our own officers and partners, as highlighted throughout the pages of it. It emphasises the extent of the challenge facing us in trying to tackle and improve the situation in Perth and Kinross in relation to child poverty. It is indeed a very sobering thought that the latest figures suggest that at least 5,155 children in our area are affected by child poverty. As stated in the report, no single service or agency has the power to end child poverty, and we must work harder and more effectively with our partners to tackle the issue. To this extent, I welcome the formation of the Anti-Poverty Task Force to complement the work of the Child Poverty Working Group, which will help this council and our partners to focus on a variety of measures designed to help alleviate child poverty. I also note with interest the work being done with Improvement Scotland and the Scottish Government on the specific subject of child poverty in remote, rural and island areas, and I look forward to hearing the outcomes of this work. The report sets out our aims and objectives for the next 4 years, which I fully support. I think we all understand how detrimental a life of poverty can be to the lifelong development of our children, and tackling this is quite rightly a priority for this council. As stated in the introduction by Claire Mailer, prevention is better than cure. Child poverty may never be eradicated, but it can be minimised, and we need to do everything in our power to achieve that aim. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost, and I'd like to echo all the remarks made by previous members commending the efforts of our welfare rights team and other frontline services who are doing their best to address child poverty and poverty in Perth and Kinross. I think the report acknowledges that, that there are challenges in tackling the intersectional aspects which compound poverty and child poverty in Perth and Kinross. It says in the report on page 44 that we know that there's 737 lone parents with a disabled family member, but have struggled to identify data for other areas of intersectionality. And I think that's something that really need to get to grips with. Prior to the first meeting of the anti-poverty task force, I arranged a meeting for the members of the anti-poverty task force, along with Perth Welfare Society, Perth and Kinross Association for Voluntary Services, and the Centre for Inclusive Living in Perth and Kinross, as well as Pink Saltire. And those groups were able to describe how intersectionality impacts on those different groups in Perth and Kinross. So I think there could be intelligence that could be provided by those organisations to officers to help them identify the priority families and the target children. And if there's more than that required, then I think it is about officers ensuring that they garner the community intelligence from those with lived experience and those that are actually working in the field, providing practical steps to prevent hunger and to prevent poverty in Perth and Kinross. And we're already in contact with a wide number of those groups, but if we can't actually reach the people that we need through purely data-driven measures, then we need to use that community intelligence and their abilities to reach those people. Capacity is a serious issue, and that may be something that comes through in the budget process and the summaries when we get that. But I don't think that we can simply just keep commending the welfare rights team and other frontline staff on what they are doing, whilst acknowledging that we have insufficient capacity. And finally, I think one important point that I would like to make is that it is important that we are accurate in what we say in the report. And on page 48, there's a paragraph that refers to the increased demand for the Muirton Community Food Share, and it goes on to mention that the North Muirton community is one of the most deprived in Perth and Kinross, which it absolutely is not. So I think it is important, particularly in terms of stigma, that we don't label communities or areas incorrectly.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'm really glad that we're taking such an active role on this matter, and I also want to thank the council officers who are working on this. They're at the sharp end of this, and they must see and deal with some terrible situations on probably a daily basis. Delighted that so far the debate has been largely politics free. Unfortunately, Councillor Leishman wanted to use this very sad and important issue to make some crass political comment relating to the Conservatives. He somehow seems to think the Conservatives were responsible for COVID in Scotland, but rather it's his friends in the Scottish Government that are completely responsible for the COVID response. I look forward to the outcome of the Parliament's inquiry into that matter. Perhaps he'll have a different view of it depending on the outcome of that. Pleased that broadband at home is referenced early on in the report. I've said for some time that good quality and fast broadband should be regarded as a necessary utility in the same way we look at electricity and water. And finally, one thing I really was pleased to see, I've said this many times before, that we should be encouraging people to learn to cook, which will help people feed their families healthy food on a low budget. So the paragraph on the One Pot Surprise project is music to my ears, and I really want to specifically thank whichever officer came up with that idea, and I wish it success. I hope it's really successful. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Leader of the Council to sum up.
As everybody seems to be desiring lunch on the chat, I will make this very short. I thought myself would manage to get through without any political comment, and I tried not to bring it in, but I didn't think Councillor Leishman mentioned that COVID was the major cause of the economic crisis and the cost of living crisis we're facing now. I think he pointed the finger about other areas, but we'll also have the war in Ukraine and everything else. So I'm not going to point the finger at one specific area as Councillor Forbes has tried to deflect Councillor Leishman's attack. So I think moving forward, I think I take on board everything everybody said there, and hopefully working together we can do what we can to mitigate child poverty over the next 4 years. I think we can accept that our ambition was to eradicate it, but if we come anywhere near to eradicating it, we as a team, a PKC team, will have achieved something truly admirable. So thanks everybody, and look forward to your continued support as we move forward in this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Members, can we agree the report? Thank you. Councillor Reid, you'd like to make a comment?
Well, it's more an apology, Provost. Thanks for taking it. If my earlier comments on condemning abuse were deemed inappropriate, I do apologise to the Chamber. I certainly do not mean to minimise or detract from the importance of both motions earlier today, and I do apologise for any inappropriateness.
Thank you, Councillor Reid, for that apology. Members, we will now break for lunch. We will take a 1 hour lunch break and resume at 10 to 2.